Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Dalton Perrine from ChessUniversity.com, and today we're going to be continuing our free video series on understanding imbalances in chess. In the first video of this series, we talked about the implodes acronym, and we talked about the basics of the 7 different imbalances in chess. This second video is going to focus specifically on the initiative imbalance. So in the first video that we we learned that the initiative imbalance is defined as pressuring your opponent with forcing moves. Whoever has the initiative is pretty much the one that's calling the shots on the board. This is a strong imbalance to have the advantage in because it's the main imbalance that allows us to attack and checkmate our opponent. All the other imbalances on the board don't really matter if we're able to get a strong enough attack to checkmate. It doesn't matter if we might be down a lot of material, we might have a horrible pawn structure, we might have way less space than our opponent. None of these things matter as long as we have a strong initiative and can checkmate our opponent. Now, not always does an attack lead to checkmate. Not always does having the initiative lead to a checkmate type position. But you kind of get the point. Having the initiative can definitely override plenty of other imbalances if we can use it effectively. That's the key. If we can't use it effectively, then it's not going to be much of an advantage to us. So the next question is, how do we play around the initiative imbalance when we have it as an advantage for ourselves? And even before that, how do we get this imbalance in our favor in the first place? Well, it all comes down to a key phrase that we had previously talked about in the definition of this imbalance, and that's the phrase forcing moves. Forcing moves in chess are moves that force our opponent to respond in some way. The 3 key types of forcing moves are checks, captures, and threats. Obviously, if we check our opponent, they have to respond to the check. They can't keep their king in check. If we capture a piece, they probably want to capture back. And if we make a threat, they probably want to defend against the threat if it's a big enough deal. So they kind of force our opponent to respond if we make a check, a capture, or a threat. If we can consistently make forcing moves and constantly make them in a row, while also making our opponent play defensive moves, then we can get a nice advantage out of this. It's also important, though, to understand that these forcing moves are not just one-move threats, like maybe just making a check for the sake of making a check. These forcing moves that we make and try to put in a row, we need to try to make them be moves that improve our position, whether we can follow up with another forcing move or not. Just because we make a check doesn't mean it's always a good thing, or just because we make a capture or a threat doesn't mean it's actually good if it's not improving our position or if we don't have a good follow-up. Moves that benefit us even if the opponent stops the threat or stops the check or the capture. So once we're in a situation where we're constantly chaining forcing moves together and we have the initiative imbalance advantage, then there's a couple of different ways we can convert this advantage. We can either try to get a strong enough attack to checkmate our opponent, or we can transform this into a different imbalance advantage. The main thing to understand here at this point is that the initiative is a short-term advantage most of the time, because we can't always have a forcing move on every single move of the game. This advantage is eventually going to disappear most of the time. Sometimes it might even favor our opponent later in the game, or maybe we'll even get the initiative again later as the game progresses. Mainly, though, this concept of short-term and long-term imbalances, it's going to be discussed a bit more in-depth in a future video in this series. For now, though, let's look at the position on the board and see if we can find a way for us to create a strong initiative and get some kind of reward as the game progresses by trying to chain multiple forcing moves together. So consider this position, and as practice, let's first of all analyze all of the imbalances present. After you do that, look for the different options of forcing moves and see if you can find a way to string a couple of forcing moves together in order to get that initiative. Create the attack, and maybe you can even get a bigger advantage after a few forcing moves are chained in a row. So go ahead and pause the video, consider this position, look at the imbalances first, and then see if you can find forcing moves and try to chain them together as best as you can. Okay, so in this game, the position was taken from, White saw 2 main options of forcing moves to consider. He saw the idea of playing bishop to d3 in order to attack the queen, and he also saw the idea of playing c5 in order to threaten bishop takes a6, which would severely destroy black's queen side here. So these being the two main ideas of forcing moves, pawn up to c5 and bishop to d3. In the game, White ended up combining these ideas. White played the move, first of all, bishop to d3, hitting the queen. The queen has only one square to move to, which was g4. White then combined this with the c5 idea in order to threaten the destruction of Black's queenside. Black played the move knight to c7 to get away from that. And from here, White's doesn't really have any immediate strong forcing moves. I mean, I guess he could take on c7, but he didn't really want to trade off his really strong bishop for that knight. White here instead saw another possibility. He saw this idea of maybe playing queen a4 in order to attack the a7 pawn, and also get the queen a bit closer to the king anyways. However, queen a4 doesn't work out right now. If White played queen a4, Black is right there grabbing the queen, so this would definitely be very bad for White in this situation. So instead of instead of having that capture available, White first chose to play the move h3 in order to force the queen to reposition a bit. Now, the queen has two options from here. She can go back to h5, which was played in the game, or she can go to a4. Let's look at b4. Let's look at b4 real quick. If the queen goes to b4, we still want to try to get to the a4 square if possible. But it's not really obvious what to do from here. However, the strongest move is actually this move pawn to a3. The queen is attacked, obviously. The queen has two options from this position: capture on b2 or go back to a5. Going back to a5 is pretty suicidal because b4 is going to trap the queen. The queen has just no good place to go to because everything is under attack. So going back to a5 would be really bad. And the queen could also grab on b2. But for the cost of this pawn, White's going to play queen a4, attack the pawn, rook over to b1, and everything is right here on the king. Even though White's down, I guess, 2 pawns at this point, White's not really too concerned about that. White's going to get the strong attack coming pretty soon there. So in the game, instead of going to b4, Black chose to play queen back to h5, but this did allow White to hop into a4 immediately with queen to a4. Black here in the game played the move a6, and now we have to see if there's another series of forcing moves, or another forcing move we can continue in this series. White found the move queen to a5, obviously threatening checkmate, which is a pretty big threat. So Black played the move knight back to e8 to defend against it, and Black is also threatening to capture the bishop. Keep in mind that if Black does capture the bishop, White cannot recapture with his pawn because the c-pawn is pinned right now. So, for example, if White makes some kind of, let's say, some kind of random move here, I don't know, rook c1, knight takes, pawn takes, well, White would just lose his queen here, which would be really bad. So instead, if you look at this position, you might notice a Bowden's mate idea. We have the bishop cutting off the king's squares to move away to, and there might be some kind of check idea on the a6 square. So some people might say, oh, I could play bishop takes a6 here. Oops. I could play bishop takes a6 here. If the pawn took, the queen would take, and this would be checkmate as the program shows. However, again, if we take on a6 with the bishop, Black is going to take on d6. White, of course, can't take the knight because of the pin, and White doesn't really have a great way to follow up here. If he tries to continue this, he's not getting anywhere at this point. However, instead of taking on a6 with the bishop, White saw a stronger option and actually took on a6 with the queen. Very strong move here. White is threatening an immediate checkmate, queen a8, because the king can't go to c7. And, of course, if Black takes the queen, White takes on a6 and gets the checkmate there. So instead of that, Black, oops, let me get rid of that arrow. Black instead played the move knight takes d6, getting rid of the bishop. Obviously, White can't take right now because then his queen gets captured and the king can move to b8. So instead, White played queen a8 check, king c7, pawn takes d6, king takes d6, queen takes d8, and Black ended up resigning here. At this point, the initiative is not there so much right now. White hasn't made a threat with the move queen takes d8, but he has converted the initiative into a pretty big material advantage here. White is ahead a full rook, I guess down a pawn, but he's ahead a full rook, which is a very big lead. And also the king is probably going to get checkmated pretty soon. It's right there in the middle of the board. All we have to do is bring a rook to the d file, and that king's a goner pretty soon. So this game showcased a terrific series of moves. Let's rewind a bit to where it started off. Showcased a terrific series of moves here, starting off though with the options of c5 and bishop to d3. It all came down to white looking to grab the initiative because he analyzed the possible options of forcing moves that he had at the start with the c5 and bishop d3 options. And after looking at these two options, he tried to work on calculating other options after black's initial response to each move. It's very important that when you find one forcing move, don't just stop there. You want to continue to look for strong follow-up options and see if you can chain multiple forcing moves together in order to improve your position even more, grab the initiative, and maybe transform that initiative into something bigger as the game progresses. So this is a great example of how you can effectively use the initiative imbalance in chess. This game could have almost came out of a tactics trainer in a way, as well as it was played. So throughout this video, we've learned more about what the initiative imbalance actually means. We've learned how to effectively use it, and it mainly comes down to looking at the forcing move options you have on the board and trying to find strong follow-ups or trying to chain together multiple forcing moves. Again, the three types of forcing moves in chess are checks, captures, and threats. And now that you've seen this video, you should be better equipped to find forcing moves and ways to grab and use the initiative in your own games, hopefully. So the next video in this playlist is going to go more in depth on a different imbalance, the second one in the Implodes acronym. It's going to be the material imbalance that will be discussed a bit more. And we'll talk in that video about how to use the material advantage well during our own games. So, are you ready to test yourself and see if you've mastered this material on the initiative imbalance in chess? Find out now by taking our free quiz on chessuniversity.com. Click the button to the right of the chessboard, or you can also click the link in the description below the video to take the quiz. Also, if you found this video useful, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our other content and programs on chessuniversity.com as well. Thanks for watching, and goodbye to everybody. Hope you guys have a good rest of the day.